The rolling hills of Lancashire whispered ancient secrets, their silence broken only by the wind and the occasional call of a bird. Emma Carter stood at the base of Pendle Hill, her eyes fixed on the excavation site where her team worked diligently. It was here, amidst the whispers of history, that they had uncovered an unmarked grave. The soil, once disturbed, revealed an intricately carved stone, bearing symbols she couldn't immediately decipher. The air was thick with an eerie calm, as if the very ground knew of the dark secrets it held. The local villagers, already wary of outsiders, grew restless with the discovery. Stories of the infamous Pendle witch trials loomed large in their collective memory, tales of innocent women condemned by fear and superstition. Emma, however, was more interested in the historical significance than in ghost stories. As an archaeologist, her goal was to bring the truth to light, unearthing the past with careful hands and a skeptical mind. Yet, as the days passed, the unease in the village grew. Strange occurrences began to plague the descendants of those who had lived in the area during the trials. Illnesses, accidents, and unexplained deaths cast a shadow over the small community. Emma couldn't ignore the whispers linking these events to the grave they had unearthed. Determined to understand the truth, she delved into the history of the Pendle witches, seeking any connection to the recent tragedies. Her research led her to Dr. Martin Hughes, a local historian and an expert on the Pendle witch trials. He was a man of considerable knowledge, yet also one who held a belief in the supernatural, a belief Emma found both intriguing and unsettling. Together, they examined the symbols from the grave, trying to decipher their meaning. The more they uncovered, the more Emma felt the weight of the past pressing in, as if the spirits of those wronged centuries ago were stirring, restless and vengeful. Emma and Dr. Hughes pored over old manuscripts and trial records, their work illuminated by the soft glow of desk lamps in Hughes' study. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, a tangible connection to the past. They discovered that the grave likely belonged to Alice Nutter, one of the accused witches who had been executed during the trials. The records painted a picture of fear and hysteria, a time when a mere accusation could seal one's fate. The symbols on the grave, they deduced, were part of a protective spell, perhaps an attempt to ward off evil or to safeguard a secret. But what secret? As they dug deeper, they found a chilling detail. Alice Nutter's execution had been accompanied by a curse uttered in her final moments. It was said that she had cursed the descendants of those who had wronged her, vowing that they would suffer as she had. The recent string of misfortunes in the village began to make a sinister sense. Could it be that the curse had lain dormant, waiting for someone to disturb Alice's grave? The idea seemed preposterous, yet the coincidences were too glaring to ignore. Emma felt a shiver of doubt. As a scientist, she was trained to seek rational explanations, but the evidence pointed to something beyond the ordinary. Dr. Hughes, who had always been more open to the supernatural, suggested that they might be dealing with a curse that had been reactivated by their excavation. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Emma, caught between her scientific skepticism and the mounting evidence of the inexplicable, felt herself being drawn into a narrative that defied logic. She knew that they needed to act quickly, either to confirm or dispel these fears, and to protect those who might be in danger. The air grew colder as they worked, the shadows in the room lengthening as night approached. Outside, the wind picked up, howling like a distant wail, as if echoing the cries of those lost to history. The line between past and present blurred, leaving Emma with a growing sense of dread. The curse, it seemed, was more than a mere legend. It was a force that demanded acknowledgement, one that would not rest until its terms were fulfilled. The village of Newchooch was abuzz with rumors. The news of Emma's discovery had spread quickly, and with it, tales of the Pendle witches resurfaced in hushed conversations. Emma could feel the villagers' eyes on her as she walked through the narrow streets. Their gazes held a mix of fear and accusation, as if she had unearthed something best left buried. Emma's rational mind struggled against the growing tension. She attended a town meeting, hoping to quell the rising panic. The local council had convened to discuss the strange occurrences, and many pointed fingers at Emma's excavation. She stood before them, explaining the archaeological significance of their findings, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The atmosphere was thick with unease, a collective fear that history might be repeating itself. As the meeting concluded, Emma overheard snippets of conversation, mentions of illnesses, inexplicable accidents, and whispers of a curse. The villagers' fear was palpable, fed by a mixture of superstition and genuine concern. Emma realized that her work had unintentionally stirred a hornet's nest, and the community's reaction was a potent mix of fear and superstition. The sense of isolation grew. Even Dr. Hughes, usually her steadfast ally, seemed more withdrawn, his own fears surfacing. He spoke of old curses and lingering spirits, tales passed down through generations. Emma found herself questioning the boundaries of her own beliefs. The logical, scientific part of her resisted the idea of curses, but the coincidences were too many to ignore. Determined to find a solution, Emma resolved to delve deeper into the history and folklore surrounding Alice Nutter. She hoped that by understanding the past, she might find a way to calm the present unrest. But as she prepared for another night of research, a deep sense of unease settled over her, as if she were teetering on the edge of a precipice, with the unknown waiting below. In the quiet of Dr. Hughes' study, Emma and Hughes immersed themselves in books and old records. The room was dimly lit. The only sounds were the rustling of pages and the occasional creak of the old house. They traced the lineage of the families involved in the trials, uncovering a tangled web of accusations, fear, and betrayal. The story of Alice Nutter was more complex than they had first thought. Alice had been a woman of some standing, respected in her community until the witch trials. Accusations against her had been motivated by jealousy and fear, but there were also whispers of her dabbling in the occult, of possessing knowledge that others feared. Her mother, reputed to be a witch, had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a legacy of suspicion and fear. Emma and Hughes discovered an old diary, hidden among the records, belonging to a relative of one of the accusers. The diary spoke of a curse laid by Alice's mother, a powerful spell meant to protect her daughter from harm. It described rituals and symbols, some of which matched those found on the grave. The diary hinted at the possibility that Alice's death had been part of a larger, darker ritual, one that bound her spirit to a curse against those who had condemned her. As they pieced together the story, Emma felt a growing urgency. The curse seemed to be more than just a tale, a complex spell intertwined with the fates of the accused and the accusers. The realization was chilling. The curse had not ended with Alice's death. It had lain dormant, waiting for the right moment to reawaken. The weight of their discovery settled heavily on Emma. She knew they were treading dangerous ground. The rational part of her still resisted the idea of a curse, yet the evidence was compelling. She felt a responsibility not just to the truth, but to the people whose lives were now being affected. Emma resolved to find a way to break the curse, to end the cycle of suffering that had plagued these families for generations. As they prepared to leave the study, a cold wind blew through the window, extinguishing the lamp and plunging the room into darkness. Emma felt a shiver of foreboding, a sense that they were being watched by unseen eyes. The past, it seemed, was very much alive, and it was reaching out to touch the present. The following morning, Emma arrived at Dr. Hughes' study, only to find it empty. The old historian was usually punctual, but today there was no sign of him. As she waited, a sense of unease settled over her, magnified when she noticed a stack of papers on Hughes' desk. They were notes on their research, but something felt off. Emma skimmed through them and discovered a letter addressed to a local news outlet. Her heart sank as she read Hughes' words, distancing himself from their work and dismissing the idea of a curse as fanciful and irresponsible. Feeling betrayed and isolated, Emma realized that Hughes had acted out of fear. The pressure from the community, combined with the supernatural implications of their findings, had been too much for him. Emma was now alone in her quest to uncover the truth and stop the curse. Her anger and disappointment were tempered by a deepening resolve. She couldn't abandon her work, not when lives were at stake. Leaving the study, Emma felt the eyes of the villagers on her. News of Hughes' betrayal spread quickly, casting her as a reckless outsider meddling in things she didn't understand. The community's suspicion and fear grew, and Emma became the target of their anxiety. But rather than deter her, these reactions only strengthened her determination to see her work through. Emma decided to press on, despite the growing hostility. She needed to find a way to communicate with Alice's spirit and understand the true nature of the curse. She also knew she needed help, someone who could provide protection or at least witness her efforts. The challenge was finding someone who would believe her story and not dismiss it as mere superstition. Desperate for support, Emma reached out to Detective Sarah Jones, who had been investigating the recent deaths. Initially skeptical, Detective Jones was a practical woman, more accustomed to dealing with the mundane than the supernatural. However, she had a personal stake in the matter. Her great-grandmother had been involved in the trials, a fact that had always troubled her. Emma and Jones met in a small cafe, away from prying eyes. Over steaming cups of tea, Emma recounted her findings, the diary, and the possible link to the curse. Jones listened intently, her skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging belief. The detective's own family history made her more open to the idea that something beyond their understanding could be at play. Jones agreed to help, not out of belief in the supernatural, but out of a sense of duty to protect her community. She saw the fear gripping the villagers and understood that finding a resolution, whether grounded in reality or folklore, was necessary. Emma felt a surge of relief, knowing she was no longer alone in her quest. Together, they formulated a plan. They would gather historical artifacts mentioned in the diary and attempt a ritual to communicate with Alice's spirit. Emma hoped this would either appease the spirit or at least provide answers to prevent further tragedies. The ritual would be risky, not least because it could further alienate Emma from the community and potentially endanger them both. But the alternative, doing nothing, was unacceptable. As they left the cafe, the sky darkened with the promise of rain, mirroring the ominous mood of their task. Emma felt a mixture of hope and dread, aware that they were venturing into uncharted territory. The line between history and legend was blurring, and whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together. The night of the ritual arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation and foreboding. Emma and Detective Jones gathered at the base of Pendle Hill, the site where the accused witches had once been judged and executed. The air was cool and still, a sharp contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within them. They brought with them items mentioned in the diary: an old iron key, a mirror, and a bundle of herbs tied with a red ribbon. Each item had a specific purpose in the ritual, intended to open a portal to the past and communicate with Alice's spirit. As they arranged the items in a circle, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The atmosphere grew heavy, and a sudden gust of wind snuffed out their candles, plunging them into darkness. Emma's hands shook as she relit them, casting flickering shadows across the hillside. Jones stood by her side, her face set with determination, though her eyes betrayed a hint of fear. Emma began reciting the words from the diary, a chant meant to summon Alice's spirit. Her voice, steady at first, wavered as she felt a growing presence around them. The temperature dropped, and the night seemed to press in on them, thick and suffocating. The ritual, meant to last an hour, felt like an eternity. They waited, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, just as they were beginning to doubt the efficacy of their efforts, a figure materialized within the circle. It was a woman, her features indistinct but her presence undeniable. Emma felt a jolt of terror and awe. This was Alice, or rather, her spirit, restless, seeking, bound by a curse she had not fully understood in life. Emma tried to speak, to ask what Alice wanted, but the spirit's appearance was short-lived. A sudden, violent gust of wind extinguished the candles again, and the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. In the ensuing darkness, Emma and Jones felt a crushing disappointment. The ritual seemed to have failed, leaving them with more questions than answers. But Emma knew they had made contact, however fleeting, and that they were closer to the truth than ever before. Undeterred by the night's events, Emma and Detective Jones decided to try again, this time with a different approach. They realized they needed to connect with Alice on a personal level, appealing to her sense of justice and the truth. They gathered more items connected to Alice's life: letters, a locket, and an old shawl believed to have belonged to her. They hoped these personal artifacts would help bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Returning to Pendle Hill, they set up the circle once more, the personal items laid out carefully. As they prepared, Detective Jones confided in Emma about her family's history, revealing that her great-grandmother had been among those who testified against Alice. This revelation added a new layer of urgency and poignancy to their task. Jones felt a personal responsibility to set things right. As they began the ritual, Emma spoke directly to Alice, appealing to her sense of injustice and the desire for peace. She asked for forgiveness and offered to tell Alice's story to the world, to clear her name and acknowledge the wrongs done to her. The air grew cold and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, Alice's spirit appeared again, this time clearer and more defined. Her expression was one of sadness and longing. Emma felt a wave of compassion. This was a woman wronged by history, seeking not vengeance, but understanding and closure. Detective Jones stepped forward, confessing her family's role in Alice's condemnation, and asked for forgiveness. The spirit's reaction was subtle, a softening of her features, a sense of peace washing over her form. Emma felt a sudden release of tension, as if a great weight had been lifted. The candles flickered, and the air warmed. They had done it. They had reached Alice, offering her the recognition and vindication she had sought for centuries. As the figure of Alice faded into the night, Emma felt tears in her eyes. The curse, it seemed, was not just a matter of revenge, but a cry for justice and acknowledgement. They had not just ended a supernatural threat, but had also begun to heal a wound left open for generations. The morning after the ritual felt different. The air was lighter, and a sense of calm settled over the village of New Chooch. Emma and Detective Jones met in the village square, where the news of their ritual and the apparent cessation of the strange events had spread. While skepticism remained among some, there was a palpable sense of relief and hope. The villagers, who had been on edge for weeks, began to resume their daily lives. Emma and Jones returned to Dr. Hughes, who, having heard of their actions and the results, was filled with regret for his earlier betrayal. He apologized to Emma, admitting that fear had clouded his judgment. Emma, though still hurt by his actions, accepted his apology, understanding the pressure he had been under. She explained the details of the ritual and the emotional impact of their encounter with Alice's spirit. Dr. Hughes, moved by their account, offered to help them document the findings and the story behind the curse. They decided to present the information not just as a supernatural tale but as a historical narrative, highlighting the human aspects of fear, injustice, and redemption. This approach aimed to reconcile the community with its past, acknowledging the wrongs done while also celebrating the courage it took to confront them. Emma felt a sense of closure, not only for Alice but also for herself. The curse had been a test of her beliefs, her courage, and her commitment to truth. It had brought her into conflict with the community, with her colleagues, and even with her own sense of reality. But in the end, it had also brought her closer to understanding the complex layers of history and humanity. Together, they organized a small memorial service at Pendle Hill, inviting the villagers to pay their respects and learn more about the history of the witch trials. The service was attended by descendants of both the accusers and the accused, a poignant reminder of the long shadows cast by history. As Emma spoke about Alice Nutter, she emphasized the importance of acknowledging past injustices and the power of understanding and forgiveness. The days following the ritual were filled with reflection and change. The village of New Chooch, once gripped by fear and suspicion, began to open up to new conversations about its history. Emma and Detective Jones became key figures in this transformation, working with the local council to create educational programs about the Pendle witch trials and the dangers of superstition and scapegoating. Emma found herself inundated with media requests and scholarly interest in their findings. She carefully curated the narrative, ensuring that the story remained respectful and focused on the human elements rather than sensationalizing the supernatural aspects. Dr. Hughes, once skeptical of their approach, became an advocate for preserving the memory of those who had suffered during the trials, supporting Emma in her efforts. The memorial service at Pendle Hill became an annual event, a time for the community to reflect on their shared history and to honor the memory of those who had been wronged. The village, once divided by fear and suspicion, found a new sense of unity in acknowledging and learning from the past. Emma, looking back on the experience, realized how much she had grown. She had started her journey with a purely academic interest in history, but it had evolved into a deep understanding of the complexities of human nature and the importance of compassion. She decided to write a book, not just about the witch trials and the curse, but about the broader themes of justice, forgiveness, and the human need for closure and understanding. The story of Alice Nutter and the curse became a symbol of the enduring impact of history on the present. It reminded the community and the wider world that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the stories we tell, the lessons we learn, and the ways we choose to move forward. As Emma sat down to write the final chapter of her book, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The events had challenged her beliefs and tested her courage, but they had also led to personal growth and a deeper connection with the world around her. The story, she knew, was far from over. History always had more to teach, and she was ready to continue learning. The chapter closed with a sense of hope and a commitment to truth, justice, and understanding, echoing the lessons learned from the story of Pendle Hill. If you enjoyed unraveling this, you're in for another spine-tingling tale. Click the video on your screen to discover more eerie stories from the Phantom Story Society, where history's darkest secrets come to life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay curious and beware of the shadows.